Hi, welcome to another consonant analysis. In my analysis today, I'm looking at somebody called Dave, who was a person that featured in the event of Michael Jackson's death, who sort of like wound up in all of that, in the form of a person being interviewed by Larry King, asking him a few questions, holding an interview with him. And I've actually done an analysis on this personality previously. And so if you look in my videos, or actually what I'll do is I'll pop a link in the description below for the previous analysis that I've conducted on which this is based. And essentially I'm just looking at his name, Dave, which is highly unusual. It's a highly unusual name for somebody to have, as I come on to in my analysis. So what I've done is I've just pulled out a few points or a few components from the markers, which sort of like highlight the point that I'm trying to make, i.e. that this is actually really Michael Jackson. It's not the person that they claim to be. There's somebody else. And so I'll just run through the analysis. So the interpretation that I've given this name is that the subject is both in debt financially and indebted to his teachers for helping him. He holds his accusers morally accountable. Although the situation is embarrassing and his heart is beating, if he goes through with this, it will make him successful and allow him to continue in life. And you might think the interpretation is a bit wordy. My interpretation is usually quite to the point, but it's just because it's only a name, you see, so there's so much information compared to the name that it warrants actually going in the interpretation. It doesn't really fit anywhere else. The rest of the analysis is with regards to what the implications are of the markers. So I considered that it was justifiable to place so much actually in the interpretation. Anyway, I'll continue. He has to sacrifice everything, such as burying both himself and his secret identity, becoming a shadow of the person he was, in the process to get closure and escape in return. But he's always wary and on the lookout, on guard, ready to pulverise who might follow him. He has been painstaking with every detail of this moment, from every keystroke to every telephone call, right down to the makeup on his face. And both of the markers, because I've done a reverse and forward analysis. If you don't know what reverse and forward analysis is, it's where I take the consonants out of somebody's speech and I either read them forwards or backwards. Usually I read them backwards only because that gives like the underlying intention or meaning of what a person is saying rather than what they're trying to put forward. Whereas the forward analysis is more or less what they're actually, wanting people to hear or to understand from what they're saying. So I've done a forward and backwards analysis because the name is quite a short thing, although my analysis might be quite lengthy. So in both the forward and reverse analyses, because the name's Dave, both of them are repeated twice essentially. So it's like emphasis. It's like this person, whoever is trying to emphasize some particular points by repeating it twice. Yeah. So moving on to the highlights, you'll notice that there's certain text in the markers, in the markers sections, both forward and reverse, that I've actually highlighted. So they're in the highlight section, which I'm going to read now. So the word that's highlighted in red is meticulous, and I cover it twice. So what I've done is I've split the highlights, each highlight, into Michael and Dave, and say why it refers to one and why it doesn't refer to the other. Why the analysis or the name Dave is actually referring to Michael. In other words, it's Michael that's the person, not somebody called Dave. So meticulous, that's highlighted in red. I've put for Michael was known to be meticulous in every detail. In every one of his productions, it's one of his hallmark features, which was undoubtedly one of the things that made him so famous. Why would he stop doing this just because the presentation was after his death? If anything, he would be even more careful with details, given how much lay on his performance being success. In other words, everything's riding on the fact that he does this properly. You can't mess it up, so he's got to be even more precise and more meticulous. With regards to Dave on the subject of being meticulous, Dave seemed to have no reason to be super critical of his performance. He was merely a relative bystander explaining his story for a very brief moment under the spotlight, not then in any way a key figure or luminary in the story of Michael, because there were other people like other pop stars and celebrities, etc., that they made a eulogy for Michael. You can understand for them, that there would be a case to be more critical about their performance, but not this particular person. He was just somebody who had a mishap one day, and as a result, Michael helped him. Concealment, that's the second marker, which is highlighted component, which is highlighted in green in the markers. So I've put for Michael, if Michael had staged his own death, there would be a need to conceal it. It is reasonable to assume, if indeed he had considered such an act, why would it be necessary with reasons, including just getting tired of the stress? It is reasonable to assume, if indeed he had considered such an act, why it would be necessary with reasons, including just getting tired of the stress and the financial issues. So he had reasons. If it was Michael who was concealing, then he had reasons to do that. With regards to Dave, I put, seemingly he had no real issues to deal with other than his past trauma of being a Burns victim and a victim of child abuse, which he seemed to have dealt with well enough, given Michael's help, not to keep any secrets. Added to which he was talking on television, which is not the arena for concealing matters. It's where you go to basically let everything out, isn't it? If it's just like an impromptu interview, somebody just asked you on the spur of the moment, can you come and talk? And why they would want this person to talk anyway, given the slew of other people that had been speaking who were actually, celebrities in the pop light, people knew them. Why did they choose this particular person to come forward? It's rather strange. But in any case, in the spur of the moment, you're not anticipating them asking questions to which the answers you will need to conceal. It's not there, So, especially when you're coming out and saying things like your father abused you, if that's that's like the top, isn't it? If you're going to reveal something like that, why would you want to conceal anything else? But it's there in the markers about concealment, and burying something. So it lends credence to the notion that Dave would not need to conceal anything in such a situation, given what he'd already said. Point 3 in highlights, meticulous too, so that's in red as well. As I've said, Michael was meticulous in every detail. If he chose the name Dave for himself in these guise, then there would have to be a reason for this. Judging by the results of the analysis performed, the name can be said to perfectly fit the situation that Michael would have found himself in if being the person interviewed. In other words, the person being interviewed was Michael. If that was the case, Dave would be a perfect name. It completely fits his methodology. And what I'm saying here is these are the words that Michael himself, or these are the words that have been chosen for this situation, Dave, yeah? Which is a name which nobody would ever have. I'm sorry, but nobody would have that name. I've never heard of it. I'm sure nobody in the world has ever heard of anybody called Dave, with the surname and the forename being being exactly the same. No parents do that. I'm sorry, but they don't. It's just a simple fact, And if somebody chose to call themselves that, yeah, why would that be? Well, you do the consonant analysis and then you find out. It tells you, exactly what their intentions were. So we've done an analysis, and what that tells us is everything to do with Michael's situation. It fits his situation exactly. Outside of this particular situation, this spotlight that this character called Dave finds himself in, none of this actually bears any relevance. But we're being told his name at this particular point with regards to this particular subject. It's something which Michael Jackson would choose for himself, a name he would choose for himself if he was playing a character in this particular situation. That's the only conclusion you can come to if you're looking at it from Michael's perspective. So meticulous too with regards to Dave, as I've said, the name Dave, who names, like I said, who names themselves or is named by their parents by this type of name, the first and the last name has been the same. Additionally, Dave is not a surname that I've ever heard of. I've never heard of anybody with that surname, you know. If he's using it as a stage name and his actual name is something else, again, why would he do that? It's absurd, you know. So, moving on to comments, that's highlights. Moving on to comments. While the markers generally seem to match the profile of a Burns victim, thankful for the assistance of a wealthy benefactor, taken into context of the previous analysis that I've conducted, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below, on the first statement made by the individual in his TV interview, what I've done is I've taken the first statement this character made and analysed it and come to the same conclusions as this report, that person is not who he says he is. He's probably Michael Jackson. And the highlighted, so taking that into account and the highlighted components in the markers below, you'll find them in the report below highlighted. The preponderance of evidence suggests that the individual that we see before us in the video is not the person that he purports to be. He's not. Moving on to themes. Themes is where I gather all of the components or relevant or the seemingly most pertinent components out of the markers. And I actually categorise them, put them together to make some sort of sense. It's like a summary for somebody that doesn't want to actually read the markers, which are just basically, it's just blocks of text with codes at the side, which can be a bit unwieldy for people to read, hence the themes. So I've split them into three main areas, yeah? The first area is teaching and learning. And this follows on from the previous analysis where it was discovered that there was evidence of somebody being taught or mentored in doing something. So teaching and learning, assistance, borrowing, painstaking, ransom, redemption, sacrifice, submit, teaching, yield. For practice is where somebody's actually practicing what they've been taught, in other words, doing the acting. Beat, throb, that's the heart. Drone, echo, fine, two for perception, in other words, too fine for perception. Reverberate and risk. And the too fine for perception, that will come into the meticulousness. In other words, somebody has tried so hard to actually make it plain that they're somebody other than they're not. Their disguise is so good, or they've tried to make the disguise so good that you can't actually tell who they are. And then for practice, the rest of practice, reverberate and risk. And the result, averting, burying, concealing, condemnation, cure, facilitating, insignificant, prosper, submit, succeed, unimportant, yield, and wariness. And with regards to the insignificance, that's what's being bartered at the expense of anonymity and being, disappeared. Comes the gift or the issue of being insignificant. You're not Michael Jackson anymore. You're not that big hit. You're not that guy on the stage anymore. You won't get the buzz anymore from doing that. You become insignificant. But that's the price that you paid for your anonymity. And I think that's it for the analysis. So as I've said, in summary, I strongly believe that this person, he actually sounds like Michael Jackson, is Michael Jackson in disguise. And that's all there is to it. The name actually gives even more evidence or emphasis to that fact on top of the report. It's like very peculiar, that such a peculiar name to choose, but yet it fits the situation so perfectly. So that's all I have for you today. My report, the source video, and also the video of the previous analysis will be in the description below. If you want to find out more about what consonant analysis is, check out the disclaimer and about link in the description below. And it's been wonderful having you. Please remember to like, share and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you in the next analysis, which hopefully should be, again, on Michael Jackson, this time wearing a mask. So look forward to seeing you then.